Good morning, everybody. Justin Dunaway here, live with the Institute of Clinical Excellence. I want to take a quick second as everybody's checking in to just quick shout out and thank you to New Heights Physical Therapy for hosting us this weekend. It was an awesome course and a beautiful facility as always. So again, Donna, Kevin, and everybody at New Heights, thank you for having us. So this morning, I want to take a few minutes and talk about pain science, the biopsychosocial model, and tissues. I feel like people kind of get lost in the weeds with this stuff a lot, and I start to hear this idea that the pendulum is swung too far one way or the other, and if you're really strong into pain science and the psychosocial approach, you've lost sight of tissue damage and tissues input into the system, or if you're really a biomechanical approach, good morning, Brooke, good morning, Mark, if you're really solid into the biomechanical approach, then you kind of step away from some of the neuroscience stuff. And it all fits together so nicely if you have a really solid understanding of this stuff. So what I want to do first is just the definition, the most widely accepted definition of pain is that pain is an unpleasant sensory or emotional experience associated with actual or potential damage or described in terms of such. So it from a cortical standpoint, it's functionally associated with thoughts around pain or with around tissue damage. And we know that it's a multi-system output, that pain is not generated in the tissues. The tissues generate information that gets transmitted up to the spinal cord, that gets transmitted through our second order afferents, that gets transmitted to the cortex. And then the cortex takes that information, along with some other information, and then makes a decision about creating a painful experience. So the best thing that we have, or not the best thing, but one of the easiest ways to think about that was given to us by Louis Gifford in the late 90s, and it's called the mature organism model. And it's essentially just this: the organism, the human being, its purpose is to propagate its DNA, it's to survive, it's to heal, it's to be able to adapt to its environment. And from a pain standpoint, the job of pain is to protect us from things that we need protecting from. It's this idea that the painful experience will create behavior change in such a way that we avoid things that need avoiding, we stay out of threatening situations, and we give our bodies the opportunity to heal when they're injured or damaged. So there are essentially three things that go into this calculation to determine whether this is something that we need to avoid. If it's something that's unsafe, it's something that's threatening. And those three things are information from the periphery, nociception, information from the rest of the body coming up into the spinal cord, coming into the brain. That information is also met with information that lives in our internal context. Our fears, our beliefs, our anxieties, our past experiences. I picked up a box in my garage once and my back hurt, and then my Uncle John, he hurt his back and now he's in a wheelchair. That information is in my head. And also information from the environment, what's going on around me, the external context. A really easy way to see how dynamic and important this system is think about if I were to sprain my ankle right now, be a huge barrage of nociceptive information into my spinal cord, into my brain, and my brain would create a painful experience around that because I need to get off my ankle a little bit. I need to give it the opportunity to heal. And over time, the amount of pain associated with that ankle and the amount of input that it takes to make that ankle hurt is going to decrease as the ankle heals. Normal, and that's the way this system is designed to work. And that's pain from tissue damage. Now, if I were to sprain my ankle in the middle of the street and my ankle hurt, and then I saw the bus coming at me, I would take that information from the external context, check it against the information in my ankle, and then my internal context would say, the ankle's not so bad, the bus is going to kill me, and I don't create a painful experience so that I can get out of the street, right? That's how pain is supposed to work. It's adaptive. It's normal. But when pain doesn't work the way it's supposed to, that's when we get into trouble, right? So we start to think about pain as acute versus chronic, and chronic pain is pain that doesn't work the way it's supposed to. But I don't think that that's a really good way to look at it, because we can have chronic pain that's still adaptive, chronic pain that's still, there's something in our body going on that needs to change, right? But what we should start thinking about is pain as adaptive versus maladaptive. So when the system goes haywire and it starts to protect us from things that we don't need protecting. So from there, we're going to take it a step further. When we start to realize that there's adaptive and maladaptive pain, we've got to start to look at some of the mechanisms that can drive the painful experience. And Keith Smart has done some really excellent work to give us some different factors around some specific mechanisms that can create a painful experience. And I'll put some links to some of his work in the mature organism model and the thing under here. But when we look at Keith Smart's stuff, he says that pain is going to come basically from three things. We either have nociceptive dominant pain, we have peripheral neuropathic dominant pain, or we have centrally dominant pain. So if we kind of overlap those on the mature organism model, this would be a painful experience. Nociceptive dominant pain would be a painful experience that the overriding factor is information coming in from the periphery, and it's not being enhanced by the internal external context. It's just such a large bombardment of information coming from the periphery that drives the pain. So even in a pain science model, tissue damage can make sense. Good morning, Lisa. Now when we look at centrally dominant pain, not all centrally dominant pain is the same, and not all chronic pain is centrally dominant pain. But in the sphere of centrally dominant pain, we can have yellow flags, we can have fear and anxiety, we can have self-efficacy, we can have stress, we can have sleep. All of these things can change the neurophysiology of the cortex in a way that enhances pain or creates pain in the absence of damaging nociception. But it doesn't just live in the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't just live in the yellow flag stuff. There's other things that live in this central sphere that can drive the painful experience, that can drive us to persistent pain, that can drive us to allodynia and pain in the absence of damage. And when we've had pain for a long time, or really even a short time, you can also have neuroplastic changes in parts of the cortex and parts of the cord, things that change our ability to accurately feel sensation at the level that it's coming into the brain and accurately locate them, right? So it's not just a psychological thing, it's also a neuroplastic change thing. So centrally dominant pain can be pretty complex, but just because you have centrally dominant pain on board, it doesn't mean that the patient it's a problem with self-efficacy, it's a problem with motivation. There's a lot of stuff that can go into there. So where we go from there, this is where pain science education can start to make sense, right? In the appropriate patient, the patient that has maladaptive beliefs about their self or a misunderstanding of why they have their painful experience, patients that have pain that's associated with stress and anxiety and some of the yellow flag stuff, or patients that have acute non-central pain, but some of those risk factors are on board. Educating them about pain makes sense. Pain science education, if you understand pain science, isn't for everybody. It's for patients that need it. Does that make sense? So, the last thing and probably the most important thing to understand about all of this, about pain science in tissue damage or peripheral neuropathic pain, is that no patient exists in a silo. There's a ton of overlap between each of these domains, and that overlap changes within the same patient, within the same session, and between sessions. So always having a good thumb on the dominant features of your patient's painful experience is wildly important. And why it's so important is because understanding the dominant features of the pain, understanding if this is adaptive or maladaptive, in the dominant features from central neuropathic and nociceptive inputs, guides our ability to answer questions that patients have had that are unanswerable previously. It guides our ability to appropriately evaluate, and not just evaluate from the terms of figuring out exactly what we need to go after, but evaluate to pull out things that we know we can change, so we can show and demonstrate change to patients that have not seen change before. Remember that most of our maladaptive, persistent pain patients have seen lots of providers, have had lots of treatments, have had lots of diagnoses, have had lots of failures, and they've got maladaptive beliefs, negative expectations, and very, very low hope and low self-efficacy. So by diving in, understanding their individual pain experience, being able to demonstrate change, we can then take that stuff and leverage it. And at the end of the day, our goal with these patients is to use this change, is to use this understanding of pain science in a way that we can leverage a transition to increased hope, reduced fear, increased self-efficacy, and getting back to movement and activity. So at the end of the day, when we're thinking about the psychosocial model and pain science and pain education and all this stuff, realize that the tissues are still part of it, and the brain is still part of it, and the external context is still part of it. And for each individual person going through a painful experience, there's going to be different factors that weigh more into the equation or weigh less in the equation. And our job is to dive in deep, really drill down and tease out what are the most dominant factors of their painful experience, and then start working on those so that we can drive hope to patients that have struggled up until this point. So I hope all that makes sense. I will post the mature organism model and some links to some of Keith Smart's work in there. And if you have any questions, post them below. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.